There you go. 4-punch, 5-punch, 6-punch combination. Body shot, bang, 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 bang.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Boom! Will Rackman get up?
Iron. You're going through all the instructions. This is for the championship of the world. I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times.
Welcome, fight fans. This is Alden Kodash of the Fight City. We are kicking off the first of a series of Fight Report podcasts with our fellow contributor, Jeffrey Fuss. How are you doing tonight, Jeffrey?
Hey, great, Alden. It's good chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So last night, we had a triple header of 3 different networks, ESPN, Showtime, and DAZN, all putting on quality cards. Believe it or not, in this new normal day and age, I'm, for one, very surprised that boxing is pulling it together the way it is in Q3 of 2020, which has been a very off nominal year in boxing, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I didn't think anyone expected it to get to this level. I think we were all kind of hoping at some point this COVID situation would kind of clear itself, at least by now.
Mm-hmm.
But I am glad and fortunate. I think we're all fortunate that sports are making a comeback, especially anyone who's a boxing fan, obviously, with this idea of quarantining into a bubble, right? Like fighters go to a bubble, they train, and then in the event that they do get sick, they at least have someone on backup ready to fill in.
Yeah, it seems like each promotional company / network has their own exclusive bubble. I'd say DAZN is the most flexible. They had their fight card in Tulsa last night with some upsets with Jessica McCaskill finally beating Cecilia Brækhus, dethroning her after a long title reign from Brækhus, and also featuring 154-pound prospect Israel Madrimov with a unanimous decision. Should have been knockout over Eric Walker. Unfortunately, the referee wasn't able to catch a knockout-worthy left hook, ruling it as slipping correctly, but he moves on to bigger and better things at 154 pounds. He's top ranked by the WBA. But what I really want to focus on is some of the interesting action on the ESPN and Showtime card. We'll start with the ESPN card. We had Carl Frampton and Michael Conlon both getting stoppage victories in London against Darren Traynor and Sofian Takouch, respectively. I guess we'll start with Michael Conlon. A former Olympian standout. I've never really been a huge fan of Michael Conlon, but I gotta say, I think this was the most impressed I've ever been from Conlon in terms of his poise and versatility and body attack that he's shown against Takouch, who's a 45 veteran and coming off a title shot against Josh Warrington. What did you make of this performance?
I agree with you. And I think a lot of our listeners would also agree. Like, there's something about Michael Conlon. Like, a lot of people, there are people who love him, but then for the most part, anyone that I've discussed him with they're not sold on him. And I understand that, from his hot take when he was an Olympian and him getting ripped off, then transitioning to the pros. This performance, though, I think stood out the most to me. A variety of attack, really targeting the body. I know in post fight in that interview, he mentioned like he's now to the point as a professional that he feels that he can kind of get away with some smaller, dirtier tactics like hitting right on the belt line, which I know he suffered 2 deductions for because Takouch was able to sell it like, hey man, he's hitting me below the belt. But variety from targeting the body, switching it up to the head, and he seemed kind of relentless in his attack.
Yeah, I mean, he hurt Takouch badly, and I totally agree with the ESPN broadcasting team that he was on his way to a TKO by virtue of body shots in the mid-rounds without those 2-point deductions derailing him. But credit to him that he was able to eventually get the confidence to refocus his attack to the body while staging off the pressure of possible disqualification if Takouch was able to sell another low blow or two. But yeah, I think Conlon is ready for top-level featherweight competition. I mean, he's ranked in multiple sanctioning bodies, but I think a fight with Josh Warrington would be right on tap, right? A perfect style matchup for him at this point in his career. Maybe not a fight that he could win right now, but a fight that he could definitely grow from and still have a chance of winning, and also a terrific sell in the UK.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be a definite show, especially in the UK. Maybe a little bit more over there than over here in the United States. I know Conlan's developing a fan base, especially in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But like those two stylistically, especially, Conlan is vying for a title shot now. That's what him and his team are moving towards next, right? I know that in the discussion was Angelo Leo or Mr. Fulton.
Yeah.
But I think with him and Warrington, that would be a lot of fun, especially after this performance, seeing how relentless and, the relentlessness as well as like his skill being on full display within this last fight. Those two, I think, I don't even know if it would go the entire fight.
Yeah, guys like Angelo Leo and Stephen Fulton, I personally, I view them as more of the A side at the moment of the featherweight division. Michael Conlan and Josh Warrington. I mean, you might disagree. Many might disagree with me on this, but I view them as kind of your B level champions. Not saying that they couldn't on a particular night beat Fulton or Angelo Leo, but the talent and the youth and overall package that Stephen Fulton and Leo displayed throughout their ascension, I think they are the future of the 126, 130 pound division. Gary Russell, I'm not even going to include him in the discussion because he fights so rarely, and when he does, it's usually against PBC picked opponents. I don't see him ever fighting a guy like Michael Conlan or Josh Warrington. Not that I wouldn't think he would beat them, because I would, but I just don't think he's relevant in this discussion right now. And Leo Santa Cruz he's already moved up to 130 pounds. He's practically fighting a 135 pound fighter in October against Tank Davis, so I don't think he's relevant at 126. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for Michael Conlan. I'm not sure if he can beat the majority of them, guys like Fulton and Leo and Gary Russell, but I still think he's got plenty of upside going into this world-class level of his professional career that I think he more or less kicked off against Takouch last night.
Yeah, no, I agree. When it comes to Conlan, there's something about like that star power that I can't really see him receiving, like him projecting. But like you said, when it comes to Stephen Fulton or Angelo Leo, those guys are running the pack. And I think if Conlan were to somehow get, eventually at some point, in the ring with them, I think it'll be a good showing. I think he'll obviously bring his A game, but I think it's just like one step behind them.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I think he's ready to give anyone a good fight. I just think in terms of becoming a champion, he'd probably have his best shot against Warrington, but even then, it would be a tall order. But I'm looking forward finally to seeing this kid develop. For a long time, just generally the lack of power and to some extent the lack of talent that I was seeing early in his career just wasn't something I really wanted to focus on in terms of his development. But he showed me something different against Takouch, especially getting the late round knockout, closing the show, refocusing his attack on the body after the deductions. He showed me a lot of class and professionalism in there. But in the main event, we had a wily veteran in Carl Frampton, former champion and the only man to beat Leo Santa Cruz, putting himself in position for a fight against Jamel Herring at 130 pounds with a body shot stoppage over Darren Trainer. He put on another good performance, worthy of a title shot opportunity. A fight that probably should have happened already this year, Frampton versus Jamel Herring, if it wasn't for COVID. And I think this is a very good fight and a very winnable fight for Frampton as well as Herring. A very tough fight to pick right now. What is your take on Carl Frampton and a potential future fight against Jamel Herring?
I am a huge fan of Jamel Herring, and I love Carl Frampton. But for some, I think as of right now, I think I would be edging towards Herring. And I don't know, maybe that's just my idea because like Carl Frampton, it seemed like he had quite a bit of ring rust. I mean, he definitely overcame. I mean, he got the stoppage. I thought it was kind of odd. Kind of laughed at it. Darren Trainer's he just waved it off. He was like, "No, I'm not taking another one."
Yeah.
You're not punching me like that again, dude. I'm done. But Frampton utilized his jab for the first 3 rounds, was being very technical, and then just those devastating body shots. So I think if he were able to land that on Herring, when those two do meet, I'd be really curious to see how Herring reacts to those punches.
Yeah, he's shown some vulnerability against Lamont Roach, who's not a huge puncher at 130 pounds, and was able to put Herring in some trouble down the stretch. So I think there's no saying that Herring is particularly immune to Frampton, who's the smaller guy but still a consummate professional. And yeah, I think this would be an excellent fight. I think it would be somewhat of an uphill battle for Frampton, who's shown vulnerability in the past against bigger guys like Leo Santa Cruz and Josh Warrington, who just kind of their size put themselves in a very advantageous position over Frampton in the past that led to their victories over him. And I think Jamel Herring could take a page out of those chapters and kind of impose his size over Frampton as well. But it's a very good fight, very interesting fight. And I'm with you. I think Frampton is a very live dog, if he is an underdog in this fight, to win the fight and establish himself at 130 pounds.
What's really cool about Carl Frampton versus Jamel Herring matchup is the class that the two gentlemen bring to the sport.
Yeah.
Right. They're two friendly, fan-friendly fighters, and they exemplify class in a sport, especially since Twitter and social media allows many fighters to do a lot of call-outs, especially with COVID. Fights were being postponed. A lot of people were, if you just want to say just talking out their mouths on social media. But Jamel Herring and back it up when they do enter that ring. And I know Jamel Herring even threw out on Twitter a quick video. It was like, hey, my man, all right, yeah, one of these days we're going to be meeting up. He just has to get past. Jamel Herring just has to get past Jonathan Oquendo in September.
Yeah, which I think he will, and I think it'll be a good litmus test for Herring, because this would be his first fight since the COVID pandemic started. And he's always fun to watch, even when he's showing vulnerability like he did against Lamont Roach. And I think it's an overall pretty classy 130-pound division, which neighbors one of the less classy divisions at 135, just full of these young punks like Gervonta Davis and Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just 130 pounds. You got a lot more seasoned professionals like Burchelt, like Herring, for example, Jojo Diaz, who's on the younger side, but still a classy professional that just beat Tevin Farmer. So, I think it's a very good 130-pound division. I mean, these guys are not unbeatable. I'll throw Oscar Valdez into that loop as well, but, they're very seasoned professional fighters that, are talented and generally offensive fighters. So a lot of good fights at 130 pounds. Moving forward towards our Showtime card in the Mohegan Sun bubble, which has been the location of interest for Showtime, PBC to put on their cards. We had a triple header started by Otto Wallin in his first fight since losing a competitive decision, which kind of looks better with age, especially against Tyson Fury, considering Fury's knockout over Wilder earlier this year. Otto Wallin stopped Travis Kaufman when Kaufman injured his shoulder. He was coming off shoulder surgery not too long ago and clearly hurt his left shoulder. Referee wisely stopped the fight not long after that. We had Rolando Ramirez beating Jackson Marinez by unanimous decision, very controversial, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And David Benavidez, who beat Alexis Romer Angulo after the scale beat him. He came in 3 pounds overweight and had to forfeit his 168-pound title and some of his purse as a result, and we'll talk about that as well. I guess let's start with Rolando Ramirez, who there was a lot of noise surrounding this young fighter, particularly because he's in the Mayweather stable, and he was built as this big puncher at 135 pounds and a very live prospect going into the mix of other young, promising 135-pound fighters like Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia and so forth. Very disappointing performance, I thought, against Jackson Marinez, who, for one, I thought clearly won the fight. I had it just like Steve Farhood had it, 117, 111, 9 rounds to 3 in favor of Mourinho's. And the scores generally went the other way. I mean, we had 115, 113 for Romero, which I wouldn't argue with, given the nature of the fight. But then 116 to 112 and 118, 110, which is 10 rounds to 2 for Romero. I mean, I definitely take issue with, just like I think the rest of the people watching from home. What did you make of this performance against Jackson Mourinho's?
I thought it was fairly pitiful for all the prospect touting that has been surrounding Rolly. I first came introduced to Rolly just through social media, I think like many of us have, especially part of the Mayweather camp, and all of his sparring footage, as well as his like little beef that he had with Ryan Garcia, and those two met to spar one another, which can be found on YouTube. But what I saw in when I first got introduced to him, a lot of his sparring footage kind of exemplified, or maybe was magnified with this matchup with Jackson Marinez. A lot of just power shots. He doesn't set up his punches, doesn't follow up with a jab. And I just thought, I just didn't see him taking it. I agree with you and Steve Farhood, 117 to 111 for Marinez, but unfortunately, somehow the judges saw it going the other way.
Yeah, he's a one-speed type fighter, which doesn't help his chances of setting up the knockout, even if he is a heavy-handed puncher, which he seems like he is. But he fights in one speed. He doesn't put his punches together. He just throws very telegraphed, overhanded punches, which look heavy. And he's landed some heavy shots, and I saw it had somewhat of an impact on Mourinho's. But when you see the same thing coming at you for 12 rounds, you can make adjustments, which a more complete fighter like Mourinho's was able to do, and I think was able to carry the fight, especially in the mid to late rounds. The thing that really bothered me about Romero in this fight was not so much him, but so much his the cheerleading going on in his corner. I mean, they were telling him he was winning most of the rounds, he was well ahead. They weren't really giving him constructive criticism that I would expect them to be giving him, given the type of performance he was putting on. I mean, he was losing rounds that they were telling him he's winning. They were telling him he didn't have to do much going in the late rounds, and maybe they knew something that we all didn't, because they ended up being in line with the official scorecards. But even if Romero was winning the fight, he was not doing the right things in there. He was, we discussed multiple things. He was telegraphing his punches. He was throwing he was fighting very one-dimensionally. And, particularly after the fight, that he was rewarded for some of these poor technical qualities that he displayed against Jackson Mourinho's. It's not really the type of performance and the type of backing that could lead you to some significant improvements in Rolly Romero if he's going to really challenge some of the top 135-pound fighters. So I'm skeptical about his future at 135 pounds. And I think someone, if not his immediate cornerman, someone like Floyd Mayweather or someone in the Mayweather Promotions team should sit down with this kid and say, hey, you might have won the fight, but you probably lost a lot of fans. You might have been technically exposed, and there's a lot of things you need to work on. So, get off your high horse and let's get to work. Because there's gonna be no,
Because I agree. I think someone does need to have a sit down and like I don't want to like just a come to your senses moment, because a lot of flaws were definitely seen, at least last night. I mean, at the post-conference or the post-fight interview, he was calling everyone out. Devin Haney, even to Gervonta Davis, and I'm like, okay, well, you at some point probably have sparred with these guys, and if anyone, or even Teofimo Lopez, and I'm like, dude, if you're calling these guys out, you got to be able to back it up. I don't know if he's chasing a payday, or if he truly, it could just be all talk, but I don't know. Maybe part of me thinks that he truly believes that he can run with those guys. And I think even if he does step in the ring with them, just give it 2 rounds and he's out.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't even tell that far because he was fighting a guy with 7 knockouts and 19 fights. A good fighter, a crisp puncher, but obviously not the kind of guy who had the strength to phase Rolly Romero. And when he does have a guy in front of him who is a significant puncher, it's not going to take too long for them to really test his chin because his defense was awful, quite frankly. He didn't move his head at all. He was getting hit with the same punches round after round, and he was very predictable in there. And really, the heavier shots carried the day for him in terms of what some of the judges favored. I wasn't surprised that he won the fight on points because, I think back to fights like Ruslan Provodnikov versus Chris Algieri, where you could have a very different perspective of who wins the fight based on what you prefer. And that's one of the shortcomings in boxing judging, unfortunately, in that you can have very wide disparities based on a criteria that's not clearly established. In this case, the judges prefer the heavier shots, which when you're sitting ringside and scoring a fight round by round, as opposed to watching a fight from a distance, sometimes they might be seeing things that we're not and accounting for some of the heavier shots. But that doesn't take away from all the poor technical qualities that everybody saw, including, I'm sure, the three judges, that he was more or less an open target for the same shots over and over by Marinez. I'd say, given the honest feedback Marinez was getting in his corner, I'd say Marinez probably has more upside at 135 pounds than Romero, despite the fact that he is now once beaten and Romero's 12-0, 10 by knockout. I would tread lightly if I was the Mayweather camp and his immediate backers talking about Romero, because I don't think he's ready for the guys he was calling out after the fight last night. So moving on to keep going.
Oh no, I like you said, I agree. They just need to kind of keep their heads down, maybe find a few more developmental fights.
Yeah.
Because if anything, I know Oscar De La Hoya went on a little tweet session last night with Ryan Garcia. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight, to be honest with you. It's not a fight. Go ahead. If you really think you're ready, Ryan Garcia, if Oscar De La Hoya can set it up, I'd like to watch that one.
Hey, I think Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell, which is going to be signed soon according to Showtime last night, or ESPN, or one of the channels. I think that's a perfect developmental fight and challenging crossroad fight for Ryan Garcia, because I've been skeptical of him technically as well. I mean, he's shown plenty of vulnerability against guys like Jason Velez, guys that he hasn't been able to knock out quickly. So there's a chance that maybe Rolly Romero and Ryan Garcia aren't too far different, but Ryan Garcia is going to be tested significantly, and we're really going to see what he's made of against Luke Campbell. Rolly Romero, it might be back to the drawing board for him, which might be the best decision. But going into the main event of the Showtime triple header, we had David Benavidez in a non-title fight by his own fault. He weighed in 3 pounds overweight to fight Alexis Romer Angulo and had to lose his WBC 168-pound title for the second time. The first was due to I believe it was cocaine that he tested positive for a while back. It really, brings up the obvious question that was brought up last night of how focused he is on his future as a top, not just 168-pound fighter, but a top-level champion in boxing today. I mean, he's a very young kid, so you can throw that in there as kind of more of the apologetic side for his actions. But now he's a man without a title, which to some extent is academic in this day and age where everybody has a title. But these are actions that need to be considered in evaluating the longevity of David Benavidez in boxing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. The discipline of a prize fighter, especially at such an elite level, and he's already lost about once before due to the cocaine, like back in 2018. And so now it's calling into question. It's like, you're a professional at the elite level, and somehow you missed weight by 3 pounds. And he didn't even try to make the attempt to go correct it. He just said, you know what, I'm walking off the scale. Yeah,
that's 3 pounds is really unexcusable in this day and age. I mean, it's just unprofessional. And anything above a pound is pretty significant, and a lot of your real professional fighters, real consummate professional fighters that are veterans, they scorn at that kind of stuff, including Abner Mares on the broadcast last night, because that just shows that, you really did not care about making weight, which is something that is part of the contract, which is part of your job. And actually, in some cases, I don't think this was the case against Romer Angulo, but could put your opponent in jeopardy. And you think back at fights like Arturo Gatti versus Joey Gamache, in which he did, on paper, make weight. He still put his opponent in some serious physical dire straits by the fact that he came in effectively 2 weight classes above him when they finally stepped into the ring. So, this is a dangerous sport. I really, I don't take PED usage or abuses at the scale lightly. I'm not saying that there was any PED usage that went into Benavidez's career so far that we're aware of, at least. But playing around at the scale is dangerous and quite frankly inexcusable. So
no, I agree. There are weight divisions for a reason. And especially as well as like this sport's intent. The nature of the sport is to harm the other person, right?
Yeah.
So PED use coming in heavy at the scale when as a professional you should be making weight. It's life or death in that ring. And unfortunately, we've seen in at least the past 2 years a string of deaths due to bodily injuries from the sport. And so I'm disappointed in Benavidez coming in 3 pounds over, not even making the attempt to correct his mistake. But maybe, is it time for him to bump up to the next weight division, to the light heavy?
That's a very good point, and that's something I wanted to talk about, is that, the performance we've seen last night was customary of a lot of performances we've seen from Benavidez, and that one of his strongest suits, and not that he's not an overall very talented, good fighter, is that his size at 168 pounds is extremely daunting, and really what helps make him the threat he is at 168 pounds against guys that are naturally smaller than him, namely Callum Smith, maybe Canelo Alvarez, if you want to go that far. But at 175, I don't know if I don't know how far he's going to have to reach down in his technical development to really challenge some of these bigger guys like Artur Beterbiev and Alexander Vazdik. I think he really needs to get back down to 168 pounds to maintain some of his advantages in size that he uses very well, and what he showed to be put to good use last night, to really maintain comfortably his stance at the upper echelon of the sport.
I agree. I think all the names that you just mentioned, like Beterbiev, I think is walking through every single punch that Benavidez throws. I mean, Romero was taking a lot of punches. But Benavidez has that, it's more so rare to see like the heavier guys throwing as many punches as like Benavidez does.
Yeah.
I know he came to huge prominence when he threw that really fast successive bunch of hooks to one opponent, roughly like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, Gabriel, I believe it was.
Yeah, and that was just like a maddening KO. Everyone was like blown away. It's like, wow, his hand speed for a 168 pounder is impressive, but I think for anyone at the 175 pound division, they're just going to be like, oh, that's cute. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a loaded division. I think technically he's no better than a guy like Vazdik or Artur Beterbiev, and physically, I agree with you. I think they might not be wowed by him and might take away one of his stronger attributes, which is his size, and might pose a serious problem. So he really needs to get back down to 168 pounds if in fact he can still make 168 pounds. I'm not sure if this was the result of just overlooking his opponent. I don't take his face value excuses of not having access to a gym and a sauna to help shed that extra poundage too seriously, and as well as a lot of other veterans in the sport. I think he needs to get that to 168 pounds because that's his bread and butter right now.
Yeah, I know the 168 pounds. There's a lot of other guys that are kind of like vying for him. I know him and Caleb Plant don't have the best relationship. And like you said, you mentioned Callum Smith. So I think if we could get those three guys at some point in the ring, right, to face one another, it would be an exciting time for the 168 division. But it also allows me to better determine where Benavidez truly is at, right? Because Caleb Plant, I know, is the hot dog. Well, maybe for like I don't know if he's a mainstream level ticket, but I certainly enjoy him, and I think those two going at it. I'm really curious to see who would take a win, and if they matched up.
Yeah, and I think that's a very easy fight to make in terms of the fact that they're both PBC fighters. They're both getting to that point where it's kind of spit or get off the pot because they're both beating everyone they need to be beating right now and are ready to take it to the next level, I think, to be able to challenge guys like Canelo Alvarez in the future if that's in fact something they're interested in doing, kind of getting out of that PBC niche of comfort zone that guys like Gary Russell have lavished in for year after year. It's really a choice when you're fighting under Al Heyman, whether or not you want to be a great fighter or whether or not you want to take the easy road, the comfort road, which, to be honest, I have no issue with. I mean, it's a killer sport. It's a very dangerous sport. And if you want to make your money and get out comfortably against fighters that don't pose their greatest risk to you, that's fine. But, if you want to pursue greatness, which I would hope David Benavidez and Caleb Plant want to, from a fan's perspective, they're going to have to fight each other. And for a guy like Benavidez, I think his best chance, if he wants to pursue greatness right now, is at 168 pounds, because 175 pounds, I don't think he's ready for that yet. So hopefully he can make it back down to 168. Unfortunately, it would no longer be a unification against Caleb Plant, so it lost some of its luster there. But the way the sanctioning body works, I'm sure he could easily fight a paper challenger for a vacant 168-pound title in the near future. They'll find a way.
Yeah, if the money's there, right, like they will find a way to make this happen.
And even if it doesn't, I don't care about the fact that it might not be a unification anymore against Caleb Plant. I think this is the right fight to make. I hope they do fight at 168 pounds. And I think the winner puts themselves in a very good position for some of the top level fighters in that realm of 160 to 175 pounds. But yeah, that covers last night, which was, I think, a very good card in boxing. I really like seeing all these different television networks, streaming networks, promotional networks putting on multiple different top level fights, and I really hope to be seeing more of this in the future. So thanks for being with us, Mr. Fuss, and I hope to be speaking with you very soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Alden. Good chat.
I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?